Tonight on the Goblin's Corner,
Tom Balding of Infinite Odyssey Games.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblin's Corner. My name is Eric.
and I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We're interviewing Tom Balding from Infinite Odyssey Games.
that's right. Infinite Odyssey Games is an independent development company dedicated to providing tabletop players of all ages a fun and immersive experience. Started as a group of friends wanting to homebrew their own sci-fi fantasy campaign, and from that drive created Other Earths, the first game out of the studio, as well as their own D6 system. Tom Balding is the CEO of Infinite Odyssey and joins us tonight. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, y'all, for having me.
Anytime.
All right. So, we've got some questions about what you're doing here. And the first one, realistically, is we'd like you to tell us a little bit about Infinite Odyssey Games.
Infinite Odyssey Games actually was founded by my partner, Joshua Hartley. He has been a tabletop player and a GM for a very long time, much longer than I have. And Infinite Odyssey basically started with him and his group of friends, like you guys touched upon, home brewing their own campaigns. From there, they all started to add their own ideas and started to tweak certain elements like, hey, this show that we like, Stargate SG-1 really does something that we like. Let's implement that. How can we make the rules work for that? And from there, Josh sort of found his passion for game design and decided that he could make something, that he thought was unique. And over the years, it's morphed a lot. It's evolved a lot. And it brings us to where we are now. And I've been with the company since 2015. He introduced me to the genre of tabletop games, and I've been sort of helping direct the course of Infinite Odyssey ever since.
So you base this off of Stargate SG-1?
That was one of his favorite shows. So a lot of the original content that he had for many years before I came along was based upon some concepts that he loved in Stargate SG-1, as well as, Warhammer 40K. He was an avid player of that. And the dice system that we use was based a lot on the Star Wars RPG. And he was just him and his friends were just sort of borrowing from shows, movies, games, all of their sort of favorite IP, but they were tweaking things and finding ways to make them work within a tabletop setting and change them up to make them a little zanier sometimes. And it's evolved a lot. It's definitely very different than where it was before. You wouldn't recognize it from even just a few years ago, but it's really grown into this very expansive project that sort of has taken inspiration from all over the place.
That sounds great.
Yeah, fantastic.
This sort of type of game that you're putting together is, sci-fi fantasy. And you have Other Earth, obviously, put together. And you also have two other supplements along with that. Is that correct?
So right now we have the Player's Handbook completely put together. We're formatting it right now, the alpha edition that's going to be released during the Kickstarter for the basic level contributors. And then we're going to obviously have the final version formatted professionally. But so the two supplements that exist are the Fog's Paw campaign and the Mouye campaign, obviously. So we have hired the writers and we have the full campaigns planned out at this point. But we're waiting for the Kickstarter to figure out whether or not we can move forward with the actual words on paper and get those all sorted out.
Sure. Only makes sense.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about the IO-D6 system. What makes it unique among other D6 systems out there?
So the IO-D6 system is one of those other things that changed a lot. So like I said, it takes a lot of inspiration from the Star Wars RPG. It's a fairly simple system. And once I describe it, people say, oh, that's very similar to Shadowrun's system. They do share a lot of similarities. But so basically, the IO-D6 system is a D6 that there's difficulty measures. So every single task that you can do is a 1 through 6 difficulty. A 1 being so simple that a child could do it, and 6 being so difficult that, it would take the leading world, like Napoleon himself, just the leading world expert in a given task to perform it. And your number of dice is determined by the different skills and abilities that you have, some of which are circumstantial. So for instance, if you're a talker and you know the person's name, that can give you an extra dice if you have the right ability. And you are trying to get the most amount of dice to roll as possible. And if you roll the amount of successes are higher, you have completed the task.
Cool.
Where it starts to get a little bit more interesting is we're trying to introduce things such as like banking your successes. So if you're trying to, let's say, hotwire a car, and that requires 3 successes. If you roll 1 success, normally that would just be a fail. But we're trying to make it to where you can say, all right, I'm not going to stop hotwiring this car. I'm going to use my next turn to do this as well. So I'm going to save that 1 success, and I only need 2 successes next time.
That makes sense
So-
in a lot of situations. Like for that example, okay, you got the wires out and you've got them stripped. You just didn't hit the right combination to get it started. So
I was thinking breaking through a wall.
Yeah.
Right.
If you didn't break through the wall the first round, but you've broke through some of the wall,
yeah,
then it's
it
still a
doesn't
success.
regenerate.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could, but you know.
And the wall could regenerate. It could be a mimic.
Right, and we were right. So we were trying to really just capture like with certain tasks, right, that are not like super time sensitive, right? Like you're in a firefight and you have to reload. But that, you know, this idea of just like it's not immediate. Some actions do take like repeated effort, especially if your skills are lower. So you're more likely, if you only have 2 strength, to have to take a lot longer to get through that wall than if you have 5 strength.
Right.
So, and there's some other small tweaks made here and there, but basically, like that's the core of the system, and it's fairly bare bones. We really put a lot of emphasis on it's not hard to use, and it's very fast. So the combat and gameplay goes very quickly. We like to keep everything 4 rounds or less is the general rule. If it takes longer than 4 rounds to start completing certain things, we axe it.
All right. You guys are a bit of a startup, obviously, producing new games, stuff like that. How big is Infinite Odyssey Games?
In the recent past, it's actually expanded a lot. So I would say we probably have 8 or 9 dedicated team members at this point. There's myself and Josh, who obviously own the company and are sort of the co-managers of everything. And from there, we've taken on several people to be writers. We're about to take on a social media coordinator and editors and things like that. So basically, we just found a team of people who wanted to actually help us with the lore writing and the editing and the actual words on paper. But me and Josh are still pretty much the only 2 dedicated, like upper management members.
It's kind of scrappy so far.
It's a little bit, you know, for a long while, it was just the 2 of us. And then as this became closer to finalization and we actually started getting to that point in development where it's like we have a product, now we're really focusing on how to get the product out there. We found a lot of people who were very interested and said, let us help you. You know, we can do this. We have a couple of writers that are going to be producing content for our Patreon, which will be released soon in conjunction with the Kickstarter. And that's more Josh's thing. I don't really handle the Patreon. But so there's quite a few people right now who are quite dedicated to this project and have been producing really great work.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, before you joined Infinite Odyssey, you were a novice to TTRPGs. How's your experience after several years in the business different from when you joined?
So, yeah, novice is an understatement. I had never touched one.
Wow.
I had never. And you know what it was? I was always peripheral to it. Like I've always been, you know, I've liked nerdy stuff and I've been around a lot of nerdy friends and a lot of guys who played and GM'd Dungeons and Dragons, a little Call of Cthulhu, things like that. So I always knew of them, but I had never really gotten in a group and played it. So still to this day, I think the majority of my personal experience is with Other Earths as it has been refined. But I have since played Dungeons and Dragons. I've watched like Call of Cthulhu sessions and different things like that. But it's definitely changed my perspective a lot, you know, from just how I approach not only like designing from a standpoint or writing lore, but even just like playing. You know, it's a whole different world than what I thought it was 5 years ago.
Give us an example of something that maybe you had a preconceived notion of, and now because you've been playing, you were like, I was completely way off in left field.
I had always thought of TTRPGs as being a lot more free form than I think they actually are in my experience, meaning that like I thought I could sit down and just do whatever I wanted with like no thoughts to physics or, you know, like
that's called Troika.
Troika. So I always thought just like I'm going to be, you know, if I'm going to play D&D, I'm going to be a wizard and I'm going to be, you know, shrinking people's heads and different things like that. And like I can come up with a reason it works or make up a spell. And it was a big reality check that it's like there are rules and there are very defined ways those rules work. And, these games are not rules light for the most part. Like it's pages. And going into like designing a game, when we play tested, it was funny because I was always railing against the rules. So I would be like a talker. That's my favorite role to play. And be like, well, why can't I say this to the person and get this result? Why can't I affect this and that and the other? Like, I had all these questions. And the answer was, well, it's just not in the rules. We don't have a way to regulate that in the rules. So that was something that I had to learn as I went, was just sort of like, there's reasons for this, and they're good reasons a lot of the time.
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Depending upon the game that's created, there's always this fine line between rules as written, rules as intended, and then story play.
Yeah.
And some games are very, very light rules, but then you really are at the mercy of the players and the storyteller. Now, if you get a good group together and you can make something like that, then you can do that. But if there's any discrepancies, then you run into some issues. And so good games have that leeway, but also provide the rules that let you make those decisions as a storyteller as well.
Absolutely. I feel like people enter the TTRPG sphere from different directions. Rules light games are great for people who enter that sphere from the improv world, where they already understand yes and giving gifts to other players, giving gifts to the storyteller. Whereas people who enter it from a video game perspective or from a having read the novels perspective benefit from having rules because they need the touchstones for how they are capable of interacting in their environment, because they come from a very concrete world into gaming versus coming from there is no concrete. In fact, there's no rules and anything goes. So other than the social compact between other improv artists, right?
Correct.
And so I feel like, each of those systems have their importance, right? They've got their place, and it really just depends on what you're into to some extent. Some people love a crunchy rule system, and some people are like, I need 3 rules. Anything more than that, and it's garbage.
Yeah.
And I think we tried to, I should say, like we always are looking for that balance, right? Which is like a lot of the stuff I did early on as a talker affected a lot of rules changes, because it was like, well, is this too stringent? Is it not stringent enough, right? Like a lot of what I was trying to do sort of gave way to this eye-opening thing of there's just too much here. We need to cut back, or they can't do enough. We need to add more rules that allow you to do. And so we're always looking for that balance between that sort of improv world and that video game world of like how many rules are going to be effective here for a good playing experience.
Absolutely.
And things change too. And that's something that's evolved. D&D's learning this now, is that players want different things out of their game as time progresses. And so it'll be interesting to see how, your game updates after you get, the version out. And over time, I'm sure it will change and adapt and evolve as well as people play it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you have a Kickstarter out currently, is that correct?
Yes, we have the pre-launch page is up right now. It goes live February 10th is the current date we have scheduled and that we're shooting for. And but you can go and visit it now and follow it and see the preliminary information. And basically, yeah, we're looking forward to a good launch.
And we urge everyone watching this on YouTube and listening to this on Spotify, iTunes, and so forth, go check it out.
Absolutely.
Help an independent gamer.
Fantastic.
Much thanks.
Yeah.
So one of the things we like to do for all of our interviews, and one of the things we do for all of our episodes, is we do a question of the week.
Yes.
So for you, my question of the week would be, you guys have a entirely built setting. What is one object you would love to be able to drag from your setting into your everyday life?
Oh, I think that would have to be, this is going to be maybe a slightly morbid answer, but we have these things called bone wardens.
Bone wardens.
Yes. And so basically one of the magic systems within the game allows you to pull souls out of dead bodies And
Shang Tsung, hell yeah.
Within a certain amount of time of them dying, and basically souls can be preserved and they can be communicated with after they're dead if you trap them in one of these bone wardens. So it's cool that one of these races that we have in one of these alternate versions of Earth, they basically have this death aristocracy where all of their great leaders throughout history are still alive and they can still be communicated with because they trap them in bone wardens.
Nice.
So you or I could talk to Caesar or Napoleon or, anybody from history. That was great.
You guys see like the Futurama episode with
exactly
the
where you were going.
The Hall
with
of
this.
Presidents, where they're just a bunch of heads. All I see is just a bunch of spirits in jars that look like that from Futurama.
I'm Leonard Nimoy.
The bone warden itself is actually a skull, and with magic runes carved in a circle on the forehead that help lock the soul in. And you can use a spell, a blood magic spell, to basically summon the soul out of the bone warden and ask and talk to it for a period of time. And souls are always truthful because they have no mortal reason to lie. But you can have ancestors. You can communicate with your ancestors from 1,000 years ago if your family has kept the bone ward.
Very cool.
But that would be the item. That would be the item.
So whose soul would you want to have?
I just think it would be cool to maybe communicate with some of the great leaders of history. I mean, think about how much history we don't have because things were lost, right? Texts don't survive the passage of time. When I was in college, I was doing these classics programs, and we would be reading fragments of like these Greek scholars who really were just like the foundation of this philosophic thoughts. And to have them to be able to fill in the blanks for you and access that knowledge that we just don't know what they said, I think would be infinitely fascinating.
That'd be super cool. I can see that.
So would Socrates still answer a question with the question because he's truthful?
But he's
That's
still
right.
Socrates.
But he's still Socrates?
Who knows how rhetorical Socrates would be as a soul and a bone warden, but I imagine he'd still be able to get around you pretty good. I don't think you'd get many answers out of Socrates.
What about you, Eric?
Well, who would I pull from?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, probably Tesla because I want my laser death rays
Ooh, yeah.
Fair.
and free power.
Yeah.
Wireless power, I might add.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to go with the head librarian from the Library of Alexandria.
Oh, that's a good
Ooh,
one.
What
that's a
up?
great-
Yeah.
Stuff he must have read, right?
Right. That we will never know about.
I never figured that stuff out. That's cool.
Another side effect of this item on the world that would happen in real life was because these people have been trapped in these bone wardens, language never really developed. People just largely stayed knowing and speaking the same languages because the souls never learned new languages. So you
Sure.
sort of had this stagnation in the culture of like, well, we want to communicate with these great figures, so we must be able to speak and understand their language. So it would
It's like
maybe
television.
create this world where we're all still speaking Attic Greek or Old Norse or something like that.
I can see that. I can also just see people who specialize in languages that run around collecting knowledge.
Yeah.
Because,
Right.
language is a very living thing.
It's true. Tom, where can interested people find your work?
So right now, obviously the Kickstarter page, is pre-live right now. I don't know exactly how Kickstarter labels it, and they can go to infiniteodysseygames.com and see all the material we have up now. They can read about the team. They can see some of our artwork, read about the game and the projected launches, and they can obviously subscribe to our email list. And we also have an Instagram and a Twitter. The Instagram is Infinite Odyssey Gaming, and the Twitter is @IO Gaming. And they can follow us there for updates, blasts, tweets, whatever they want. And we're just sort of expanding from there.
Tom Balding is the CEO of Infinite Odyssey. Check out their Kickstarter and Other Earths with the IOD6 system. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to see you.
Questions or comments? Write to us, info@goblinscorner.com, or you can reach me, Eric at goblinscorner.com, or
Me, Matt at goblinscorner.com.
we're on all the things. Matt, what are some things that we're on?
We're on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Twitch,
As Goblins Corner,
and Instagram.
as the Goblins Corner. Did you like our show? Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, YouTube and Twitch.
Click the 5 stars, give us a review on iTunes, Podchaser, and YouTube. It boosts the show, and it feeds the hungry algorithm.
That's right. And if you don't subscribe, we'll put your soul into a jar.
That's right. Only we're not going to ask you important questions. We're just going to harass you about things you've said.
Exactly. That's all the time we have for tonight. Once again, my name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, folks.
The Goblin's Corner is written and produced by Eric Holden and Matt Staples.
Show song by the Mighty D20.
What a wonderful guy.
This is a Subterranean production.
The end.